My name is Mohan Vivekanandan. I'm from Johannesburg. I'm with the Development Bank of Southern Africa, the DBSA.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity. The DBSA, our mandate is to fund sustainable infrastructure projects, primarily in South Africa, but also across the African continent. And so when we were asked by the African Development Bank, which is one of our key partners, to become one of the founding partners, along with a group of other mainly African financing entities, to build a more sustainable, more robust Africa, it was a natural opportunity for the DBSA. And also, if we go back to the start in 2018, AIF was based in Sandton, and working with the province of Gauteng. And hence, it also made sense for us, given that that's where we're based, to become a partner. And since then, obviously, the event has grown in size. But for us, it's really about, one, showcasing investable projects in South Africa. So it's an opportunity for us to bring projects from South Africa to a broader group of investors, both African investors, but also global investors that come together. And two, it also is an opportunity for us to be exposed to other projects that align with our mandate of promoting infrastructure and utilizing infrastructure to promote economic growth and to improve quality of life on the African continent. So we also get exposed to other investable opportunities. And three, it's just a chance to be working with our natural funding partners. If you think about the African Development Bank, but the other 6 partners as well, those are all entities that we work very closely with, that all have development but investments in their mandate. So it makes sense for us to be here. So as an example, the projects that we're showcasing this year are both in the energy sector. And as you know, in South Africa, there's a massive shortage of power. And so here's an opportunity to showcase some of those projects. And one of them is in the green hydrogen space, so it's newer technologies. Another is more about making our buildings, the government buildings in South Africa, more energy efficient. So both of those, are broadly in the energy space. There are, other projects in transport around municipal infrastructure that we've also showcased in the past. Also in healthcare, which is another sector that the DBSA operates. One, within South Africa itself, we work quite closely with Transnet, and we're funding some feasibility studies to improve and to look at new port investments in South Africa. And we also support them on their general capital program, which also includes ports. But beyond that, if you think about the rest of the continent, we have been involved in port investments. One in particular was about a $500 to $600 million investment that we provided a portion of, about $100 million in Angola. And that's to and it was right on the border between Angola and Namibia, so it's within the Southern African region. And so that's a transaction. We've looked at ports projects in Kenya and Tanzania as well. And then further out in West Africa, we've also been involved. There's a ports-related transaction we funded in Ghana, as an example. So what we try and do as DBSA is to marry and maximize the development impact of our investments, along with ensuring an adequate financial return, adjusted for the risk of those projects, so that we don't have to go back to our shareholder, which is the South African government, for funding, and also so that we can repay loans that we get from various commercial funders, institutional investors. We have bonds that trade in the stock exchange in South Africa as well. So we do need to make enough of a financial return for those purposes. And so, that return kind of differs based on the level of risk that we're taking. But what I can say is, if you look at the financial performance of the DBSA as a whole, we are quite a profitable business, both in our South African operations and in our operations in the rest of the African continent. Sure. Within South Africa, there's a number of development finance institutions, DFIs, each of whom have a slightly different mandate. So as the DBSA, our mandate is to focus on the infrastructure sectors, both economic infrastructure, energy, transport, bulk water, telecoms, ICT, and also more social infrastructure, so healthcare, education, affordable housing. So that's where we focus. So when we get involved in a transaction that may be, say, related to agriculture, it will be from an infrastructure lens still. So it may not be that we're directly funding agriculture and agro-processing, but maybe bulk water that's needed. So there's a transaction in Limpopo province in the north of South Africa where we're helping to unlock water, and that water is going to be used for both industrial and agricultural usage.
Okay. And you mentioned anywhere else other than in the SADC region? Are you around ECOWAS regions? Are you also investing up there?
Yes, definitely. So if you look at our investments, about 60 to 65% is within South Africa by value. The remaining then 35-40% is in the rest of the continent, and that's roughly equally split between Southern Africa, which is kind of our near neighbors, and then the remaining, then 20-odd% would be composed of both West Africa, the ECOWAS countries, and Central and East Africa. I would say there are different groups of development banks, and then we utilize those relationships for different purposes. So as an example, with a lot of global development banks, those from Europe, North America, Asia, and multilateral ones, the World Bank, African Development Bank, we often rely on them for lines of credit to be able to do our funding activities. They also provide technical assistance funding. They work through us to provide those funding. Then you have other regional development banks on the continent that we jointly invest projects. As an example, near to here in Senegal, we jointly funded a project for a hydroelectric project with the Africa Finance Corporation, which is one of the founding partners of the African Investment Forum. In Gabon, we jointly funded a project with the African Development Bank. So those are specific examples, right? Then closer to home in Southern Africa, we played a leading role in the Southern African DFI network. There's roughly 40 of those DFIs, all from the 16 SADC countries, and the DBSA plays a leading role there. Last year, we were the chair of the network, but on a regular basis, we, for instance, lead the infrastructure working group of the SADC DFI network. So we work with those DFIs to jointly identify, develop, and fund projects. Two examples. One is in Namibia, where we jointly funded the Trans-Namib Railways with the Development Bank of Namibia. And on our side, that's over 2 billion rands worth of investments. Another is in Mozambique, where we work with BNI, which is the Development Bank of Mozambique, on funding electricity transmission grid upgrades and distribution upgrades in Mozambique with South African partners that are actually doing the work. So with South African benefits as well. Traditionally, if you think about infrastructure, it was a game for the public sector to deliver infrastructure, right? If you think about, you had electric utilities that are owned by the railways, the roads, the water utilities, even in the telecom utilities before the mobile companies came on, right? Then what we found though is that a lot of these utilities are not well capacitated. They don't always have the balance sheet to drive new investments. There may be for a number of reasons why they are not as efficient as they could be. And we've seen that in South Africa across various sectors as well. So what it then requires is, how do you then open up opportunities for private investment, for the private sector, especially the local private sector, but also foreign investors, to come in and really bring innovation, new technologies, new management, and capital to bear. And we've seen that happening most obviously in the mobile space. But the same is now happening in South Africa in the power sector. And we see that, but that requires policy changes to enable private sector to come in and participate in a space that was traditionally the domain of the public entity. So governments must change laws, must create those opportunities. And then you'll find private sector coming in. So that's something that we play an active role, especially in South Africa, because we are a South African government-owned entity. So it's easier for us to do that in South Africa. We've done it in the power sector. We've done it with student accommodation. We're doing it now in the water sector with a water partnerships office with the Department of Water and Sanitation. And then we play a supporting role in those countries that are looking for that kind of support from the DBSA in doing that as well.
Okay. Mohan, thank you so much for spending time with us.
It's my pleasure.
Anything that else you want to say that you think you're looking forward, and how's the deal room happening? Any particular deal that you're looking at?
As I mentioned, there's a couple of transactions that we're going to be showcasing. There's a lot of other interesting ones, in the energy space, in ports and logistics, transport and logistics that we're seeing. So it's quite exciting for us just to be here again in person, after a couple of years when we weren't able to come together. But also for people listening, South Africa is a space that's really opening up. The government's very interested in private investments coming in. So, don't forget about South Africa as well. And if you need a partner, then the DBSA is an obvious one in the infrastructure sectors.